Chaos is one of the strongest options NTE has released for players looking for an on-field Lashana main DPS, but I get it, there really aren't that many to begin with. That said, his biggest strength is his burst damage, where he marks enemies with Warrant, builds Crime, and then spends it with Final Verdict, while Remora adds additional damage once the reaction ends. Now to add to this though, if you already own Hathor and Zero, Chaos becomes even stronger because they give him the Remora setup that his kit desires. With this though, Chaos does need a lot of field time, the right teammates, and a proper build to reach his full potential, so today I'll be covering everything you need to know about Chaos, including how his kit works, his rotation, his best build, arcs, awakenings, teams, and whether he's actually worth pulling for. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed or learned something from today's video. And now a word from today's sponsor, Enjoy GM. If you're planning to top up in Neverness to Everness, new users will currently get an extra 8% coupon after registering with Enjoy GM. That said, Enjoy GM offers discounted Rift Crystals with up to 22% off first-time purchases, and to add to this, depending on the region, after stacking Enjoy GM's discount with the 8% coupon, the 6,480 Rift Crystal package can actually drop to around 78 USD. Of course, these actual prices and offers will vary, but the process to do so is, again, pretty simple. First, you bind an email to your NTE account in-game, and then on Enjoy GM, you'll enter that same in-game email, the password used only for top-up verification, and then select your server. Now, this information is only used, again, for the recharge process and isn't stored, but if you're worried about safety, you can always change your password right after the top-up is completed. Enjoy GM is also PCI DSS certified and has many Trustpilot reviews, but check the link in the description and join their official Discord for extra discounts, giveaways, and updates. Now let's get back into Chaos. Now, Chaos has two main mechanics, which we touched on earlier, but these are Warrant and Crime. Warrant is a mark applied by his redirect skill and ultimate, and when Chaos attacks an enemy affected by Warrant, he deals 20% increased damage to that target. His passive, Prime Target, increases this bonus to 30%, and Crime, by contrast, is the resource used by Final Verdict. Chaos can build Crime by attacking enemies, then spends it by holding down his basic, but if Crime hasn't reached its cap yet, Final Verdict will only perform its first hit. When Crime is full though, this will consume the entire meter, add a second hit, and deal increased damage. So the loop is pretty simple. Apply Warrant, build Crime, then use Final Verdict when the meter is full. Now, as for skills, Chaos's basic attack is known as Pursuit. This is a 5-hit attack and helps build Crime, but once Crime is full, holding down the basic will activate the complete version of Final Verdict, which is where a large source of his damage actually comes from. His redirect skill is known as Doubt Mark, and this attacks enemies in front of him, summons his Foghound, and applies Warrant to up to 2 enemies for 15 seconds. This is also normally how you'll begin the rotation against 1 or 2 priority targets, and his ultimate is Retribution. This will attack nearby enemies, applies Warrant to every enemy within range, and also puts Chaos into Dread Echo. During Dread Echo, Crime rapidly generates over time, and this also allows him to fill the meter and use the complete version of Final Verdict much more frequently during his ultimate window. His passive, Justice in Time, is what makes Remora important for him, and Remora normally slows an enemy's movement speed and attack for 5 seconds, but with Chaos, when Remora ends, Justice in Time will have him deal Lakshana damage equal to 800% of his attack. Now, each second beyond Remora's normal 5-second duration increases the total damage by 45% up to a max of 300%, but Justice in Time also resets Remora's duration when the reaction is reapplied. This is also why Hathor is his most important Remora teammate though. She extends Remora from 5 seconds to 12 seconds, allowing Justice in Time to reach its max damage increase. This partnership is also pretty good because she gives the team 10 crit rate when attacking an enemy affected by Remora. But now let's move to his rotation. You'll start with Doubt Mark to apply Warrant, use Chaos's normal attacks to build Crime, and when Crime reaches its cap, hold the basic and use the complete version of Final Verdict. When Retribution is ready, you'll use this to apply Warrant around Chaos and enter Dread Echo, and during Dread Echo, you'll use Final Verdict whenever Crime reaches its cap. Once Dread Echo ends though, you'll return to Doubt Mark and his normal attacks, and so the rotation is pretty straightforward with apply Warrant, build Crime, use Final Verdict, then use Retribution to generate Crime, and repeat Final Verdict more frequently. On that note, Chaos does want a lot of field time, so keep this in mind, and he isn't really a quick swap character. That said, his teammates also set up reactions and support him before he remains active for most of the damage window. Now, as for skill priority, the first that you'll want to upgrade is Basic Attack, because this, of course, increases the damage of his Final Verdict, but after this, you'll upgrade his Ultimate because Retribution gives him faster Crime generation. Following this, you'll then upgrade the Redirect skill, and finally, you'll upgrade Support skill last. Now as for build, Chaos is an attack scaling crit DPS, so it's not super complicated. His most important stats are crit rate, crit damage, universal damage, and attack, and of course crit rate is important because Final Verdict represents a very large portion of his damage, and if you miss crit with this ability, it's a huge loss in DPS. His console gives him 16 crit damage for every Type 3 module equipped, and with 4 Type 3 modules, he gains up to 64 as a result of his console bonus. As for his cartridge set though, you'll use Street Boxer, as the 2-piece effect will give 10% Lakshana damage, and the 4-piece will give 14% crit rate. After the team triggers Remora or Stain though, the bonus here will increase by another 14% for 20 seconds, giving Chaos up to 28 crit rate just from the set alone. As for the cartridge, at the moment, crit rate is the safest option if you still need to reach 100 crit rate on Final Verdict, but of course, once you have enough crit rate from Street Boxer, his arc, and subsets, you can switch to something like attack, crit damage, or Lakshana damage depending on your build. For subsets, of course though, you'll still prioritize crit rate, crit damage, universal damage, and then of course attack. Now as for arcs, Chaos's best arc is of course his signature, What's Desired. This gives attack and 24% crit rate, but this also permanently increases Lakshana damage by 25%. After using a redirect skill or ultimate though, this will also give 40% crit damage for 20 seconds. The duration of this will also reset whenever the effect activates again, so Chaos can maintain it pretty easily actually through his normal rotation, but as you'd imagine and to no one's surprise, his signature is his strongest option, though he doesn't necessarily need it to function properly. With this, Fluff of Ferocity is a strong alternative, especially if you've already invested or owned this. This also grants attack, but builds crit damage whenever the wearer lands critical hits. Camilla's Society can also be used as an S-class stat option, although Chaos can't really use its passive that well. For a more accessible option though, A Time Will Come is his best A-class arc. At max, this will give 20 crit rate and 10% attack, defense, and HP when the team at least has 3 different Esper types, but the priority here will be to get Chaos first, then decide whether you actually want to invest additional tri-keys into his signature arc. Just keep in mind that he does still have alternatives. Now as for Awakenings, Chaos does work fine at A0. That said, despite his gameplay feeling pretty fine even without any Awakenings, the main ones that you'll want to consider are A2, A6, and A3. A2 allows Chaos to ignore 20% of the target's defense whenever he attacks an enemy affected by Warrant, and this of course is just a direct damage increase, though a pretty notable one. A6 immediately fills crime to its cap after using Retribution, and this of course allows Chaos to use the complete version of Final Verdict immediately after using his ultimate. A3 is also pretty notable as it gives him 30 crit damage for 20 seconds after using his ultimate. A1 grants him additional 30% crime when attacking enemies affected by Warrant. A4 allows Warrant to be transferred to another enemy when a marked target is defeated, and A5 increases his damage by 20% when only one enemy affected by Warrant remains on the field. Now despite all this though, again, I do primarily recommend A2, A6, and A3, but for most players, one copy of Chaos will really just be enough. Now regarding teams, the first team I want to recommend for Chaos is Chaos, Hathor, Zero, and Juyuan. Chaos is the main on-field damage dealer in this case, and Hathor extends Remora to 12 seconds and grants crit rate against enemies affected by it. Zero helps the team trigger Esper cycles consistently by filling the cycle gauge with their redirect skill, and Juyuan, as usual, adds anima and groups enemies together, which is pretty helpful. When the team triggers Blossom though, its Vita pistols can hit an enemy affected by Remora and activate Charge, but Charge will also give the active character 10 ultimate energy, helping Chaos use Retribution more frequently. For a safer version though, you can run Chaos, Hathor, Zero, and Fadia. Fadia will give the team more protection, which helps of course because Final Verdict has a long animation and can sometimes leave Chaos with lower health in general, but she also gives access to Stain, the Lakshana and Psyche reaction. Stain increases the Lakshana and Psyche damage an enemy takes by 20% for 12 seconds, but the main trade-off here is that this version doesn't have anima, so it can't trigger Blossom and Charge for the additional ultimate energy. Another option here though is Chaos, Hattori, Zero, and Juyuan, and this of course uses Hattori's time stop and skill recording mechanics alongside Blossom and Charge. And who knew, Hattori, one of the best sub/secondary DPS in the game, can also be used with a main fielder like Chaos. Now again though, this simply provides another damage source, though it does not extend Remora like Hathor does, which is an important detail to keep in mind. The basic rule of thumb though to follow when building her team, however, is to use a Cosmos character to trigger Remora, and in most cases it would ideally be Hathor. Then you should use Anima to trigger Blossom and Charge, or Psyche to trigger Stain and provide a safer team. Now in terms terms of less combat-oriented features, Chaos's special trait lets him leave his Fog Hound behind as a teleport anchor in the open world, which is honestly pretty cool. There are endless ways to use this, but of course being able to explore and later teleport back to the Hound's location is a pretty good reason to have him. To add to this though, one of his life skill upgrades increases the number of teleport anchors that he can place, which is actually really cool, but his other life skill will improve fishing. With it, this will increase the daily premium purchase limit in Sea Angler, improves special bait effects, and reduces the stamina of valuable and rare fish. Now let's actually address whether Chaos is worth considering. Of course, this character is really nice if you need an on-field Lakshana main DPS, and with this gameplay, you have a pretty straightforward and clear rotation, strong damage, and excellent synergy with Remora teams, and he's also pretty valuable, especially if you already have characters like Hathor or Zero invested in. The main downside here though is of course that he wants a lot of field time, and so especially if you're someone who likes to constantly rotate through different characters, his gameplay may not be necessarily for you, though this is definitely more of a preference, whereas I'd definitely say that Final Verdict having a pretty long animation is definitely something that will be more of a concern for you, as you'll then have to consider healing or protection in order to save him in harder content. With this, for most free-to-play players, at most getting one copy of Chaos is enough, and though his signature arc is strong, A Time Will Come is also a pretty usable A-class alternative instead. Overall, and as a result, I believe that Chaos will definitely be strong, as the likely next rotation of endgame content will feature or empower Chaos players who are pulling for him, but otherwise I don't necessarily think that this is a must-pull character, though I wish good luck to all that are pulling for them. That's it for everything you need to know about Chaos though. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, good night.